Okay, so thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Emerald Hernandez-Bada. I am an assistant director here at your Department of Neighborhoods. Let me go ahead and take that off while I'm here. For everyone here, thank you for coming out. For everyone online and joining us from home, thank you for being here. This is our third annual Landlord Series. And on the behalf of Director Carla Williams-Scott, we are glad to have you, and we're glad to have all of our panelists here today who will be introducing themselves here shortly. The goal of these series are to ensure that our landlords know everything they need to know about what the city has to offer, about what our rules and standards are. We know that landlords are critical to our city. Landlords are our partners to establishing safe neighborhoods and stable neighborhoods. I, along with Hqs Brown, who will be moderating this discussion, we focus on neighborhood safety, and the fastest way to bring safety to a neighborhood is to bring in stable housing. So truly, we see you as partners as we move forward in our work, and again, everyone at home, you are our partners as we move through this. So without further ado, I want to bring up our first speaker, our Assistant Director of Housing Strategies, Aaron Prosser.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out on this ridiculously beautiful night as we head into late fall, early winter here in Central Ohio. I am the Assistant Director of Housing Strategies. Full disclosure, I took the position with the City of Columbus in June, so I'm relatively new to the team. It is a newly created position, and it really was reflective of what you all probably see on a regular basis in the work that you do, that Columbus is changing, and that we are starting to recognize the need to really look across housing in general and think about how we're going to grow in our community and what ways in which we need to look at city policies, practices, and procedures, and really thinking about how we modernize those to fit the City of Columbus as we move forward. You know, I think, Hqs, I think this is under the banner of my talk is the state of housing, which is a pretty big, let's see if that helps, it's a pretty broad topic, and as you guys are well aware, my family moved here to Columbus in 1980. The population at that point in Columbus was about 500,000. If you guys saw, we just had the 2020 census data released for Central Ohio, and the City of Columbus is now just over 900,000. So in the time that I've grown up here in the community, the past 40 years, it's doubled in population. And we know that looking at our growth trajectories, right, we're a city that people are choosing, we're getting a lot of young people moving into the community. As we look towards our growth projections, you know, we looked in 2010 at the metro region and we really thought, well, we may be by 2020 up to about 1.9 million people for the region. We ended up surpassing that and getting up to 2.2 million. By 2050, we're expected to be, 1.9 million and then 2 million. By 2050, we're looking at a population of 2.3 million. And so we're gonna have to be really thoughtful about how we house those folks. Right now, the City of Columbus, just the City of Columbus, not the region, adds the equivalent population of the City of Bexley every year. So we are growing immensely, which we can all see on the ground, and we'll continue to grow, right? And so how we do that, we really need to start thinking about. And when we talk about the growth that occurred last decade, it happened everywhere. I think we've got folks here that are probably from throughout the Columbus community, but when we look at downtown, we grew from about 5,000 people to just shy of 10,000 people. So we doubled our population downtown. When we look at the urban neighborhoods, really from 5th by Northwest, right there by Grandview, and across the central city to the Near East Side, and including parts of the South Side, including Marion Village and Schumacher Place, we gained 14,000 residents just in those census areas alone. Linden grew for the first time in the last 50 years, and they increased their population by 7.3%. The Northland area grew by 15.4%. The Northland population is now at about 102,000 people, and if it was its own city, it would be the 6th largest city in the state of Ohio. In conjunction with that population growth, what we also saw in a lot of the neighborhoods, and probably what you guys are seeing, is we also saw a pretty significant drop in our vacant housing stock, right? So when we looked at Linden, we got a 7.3% increase in housing, but our vacant housing units dropped by nearly 35%. In Northland, the vacant housing units dropped by nearly 50%. In total, in between 2010 and 2020, the City of Columbus lost 9,400 vacant units, not lost, I shouldn't say that. They have been now occupied. So the big takeaway message when you think about how we are growing, and we're growing everywhere throughout our community, and it really between 2010 and 2020, what we did was utilize the vacant housing stock that we had to accommodate that growth. We have now used that supply, and it is extremely limited at this point, and so moving forward, we're gonna have to look at building new units and really looking at how we add folks. Last year in Central Ohio, so not just the city of Columbus, but the region, we added 11,000 units. That was by far our biggest production year in the city's history. In comparison, we should be building between 14,000 and 21,000 units a year to maintain growth. Just for comparison, Charlotte, which is just a little bit smaller than we are in population, they added 23,000 units last year. Nashville, 25,000. Austin added 40,000. And Raleigh, which is 800,000 people fewer than we are, added 16,000 units. So between 2010 and 2020, we just averaged about 7,100 units a year. So every year, we're chronically underbuilding, and we're continuing to see that stock get occupied. And we're continuing to see then prices go up both for renters and for homeowners. The type of development that we built, those 7,100 units across time, really didn't meet the need either, where we saw there was not enough units for folks that are needing subsidized housing. We saw in Ohio, so outside of Central Ohio, but in the state of Ohio, there are about 43 affordable units for every 100 extremely low-income renters. In Central Ohio, which these gentlemen could probably talk a little bit more in detail, but it's about 17,000 people that are waiting for housing choice vouchers. And nearly 70% of individuals earning less than $50,000 a year pay more than 30% of their income for housing, which is what we would then consider to be housing cost burdened, where you have limited money to pay for schools, for food, for transportation, as that percentage increases. So 70% of people earning less than $50,000 in our community are rent burdened. So we're gonna start to have to think about additional housing units. We're gonna have to think about more diverse units, right? We're gonna have to think about families, we're gonna have to think about individuals, we're gonna have to think about seniors, and we're gonna have to think about where those units are, right? We're gonna have to think about where we are in terms of our job centers, where our opportunities are, and how we locate housing that's not only close to that, but maybe can get close to that. In my job, again, I'm in my 4th month. This will really be what I focus on. I look forward to working with the Department of Neighborhoods. I look forward to working with all of you to really figure out how to change that trajectory from where we've come up to 2020 and figure out how we're gonna move forward. We need more affordable units to serve our most vulnerable families. We need more market rate units, right? We need to bring more units online just to help to fill up where we've got the growth. And then we need those units close to jobs and opportunities. The city's also working with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission and CODA to think about our transit opportunities and how we build dense housing along transit corridors instead of just relying on personal vehicles. It's about $11,000 a year average to have a vehicle in Central Ohio. And that again adds to that percentage. If you're already rent burdened and then you're adding that cost of transportation on, you can start to see where we've got families that are not keeping up with the growth that we're having. And we wanna make sure that the growth that we experience in Central Ohio is experienced by all of our residents and not just by a few. But it will take some deliberate action, and I'm excited to get to work on this on behalf of the city. So I'm sure there's a deep dive I could do on any one of those things. That is kind of how I'll lay this conversation in terms of the state of housing. So Curtis, I don't know if, okay, you're up next, okay. All right, well, thank you guys. I think I can answer questions when I get back here, okay.
For that, Aaron, do you hear me okay? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out, and for those of you viewing virtually, thank you for being with us this evening. My name is Curtis Brown, and I'm a neighborhood program specialist with the Department of Neighborhoods, overseeing some portions of the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy and some of our other special programs as this event tonight. We are happy that you're here with us, or you're watching us virtually for our 3rd annual event. We started this 3 years ago. In response to some information that we received from residents through our neighborhood safety committees. And it has been a popular event every year, so we're excited to be back with you this year. As Aaron spoke about Tonight's topic theme really is the state of housing. And that's really kind of the theme of our whole series this year. As we know, things are changing. Our population is growing within our city, and we're hoping to be able to be a partner to landlords throughout our city to help our residents and, of course, build stronger neighborhoods. When we started planning this year's event, we really wanted to take a look at everything that we have encompassed over the past few months, looking at, as I said, generally the state of housing. We also have a session that deals with safety among our residents and how landlords can help make neighborhoods safer. We're also talking about a few other topics in our series this year. So again, thank you for watching this evening, and thank you for joining us in person. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's series. And first, what we're going to do is really have panel introductions. Of course, you see this wonderful group here, but you need to know who they are. So Aaron, I know you've already introduced yourself, but we'll go on to Ms. Parise, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll go down the line. If you could just tell us your name, where you are, your title, and what your department division does.
Can you hear me? Yeah, all right. Hi, I'm Rita Parise, and I'm the Housing Administrator for the Department of Development. Aaron and I work in the same department, working on similar things. The primary focus of what the Housing Division does is to provide stable, safe housing for those who are of moderate means. And so we work with existing homeowners to do home repairs. We work with rental developers to develop rental units. We work with homeownership developers to develop homeownership units. But our primary focus is to serve those individuals of more moderate means. We also administer the tax abatement program. So, if you've got questions about that, hope to touch on that a little bit this evening. And we also run the Lead Safe Columbus program. And while you may think that that's not a big deal, there are some really cool things that you can get as a result of making a unit lead safe. So thank you for having us this evening. I look forward to our discussion.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Davis. I'm the Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. I've been with CMHA for a little over 15 and a half years now. Worked in all of our departments except for finance. I can add though, so don't be alarmed there. Coming here today is very, very important for the Housing Authority because we are trying to connect with more owners because we do need more landlords to support the affordable housing mission of CMHA. So the more we can connect with an owner to entice them to participate in our program is where we're trying to go. So we look forward to having conversations with you and answering your questions as you ask them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Carter. I am the Assistant Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. I work under this man right here. I oversee more of our community relations department. So I deal with a lot of landlords in regards to our inspection process, our payments, overseeing our compliance department, and things of that nature. Like I said, happy to be here and looking forward to some of your questions.
Great, thank you so much, and we're really thankful that you all decided to join us this evening, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. Thank you. With that being said, we want to make sure that this is an open dialogue. So for our attendees here in person, if you do have questions for our panelists, feel free to step up to the mic over there, the microphone over there, and we will acknowledge that and be sure to answer your question. For those of you who are viewing us virtually, the chat feature is enabled on our YouTube and our Facebook pages. So if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and we will make sure that we get those, and we will get those answered. With that being said, how about we get started? So first, let's kind of talk about some things with CMHA, and this can really be for Mr. Carter and Mr. Davis. If a landlord, property owner, enrolls their property in the Hqs Choice Voucher Program, what does that process look like?
Well, essentially, to enroll a property within the Housing Choice Voucher Program, you would first need to connect with a actual voucher holder. There's a website in place called affordablehousing.com, and there's an individual, Rosetta Brown. She actually connects landlords with tenants who have housing choice vouchers. And with that, once you connect with the person with the voucher, they then complete what we call a request for tenancy approval that's submitted to our intake department, and then we begin the process of executing the contract, which goes through our inspection process, passing the Hqs inspection, and then we execute the contract, if everything checks out on that end.
And about how long is that process?
That process, from start to finish, so let's say, and when you say, as far as from executing the contract or when a person gets a voucher?
I would say to a person when they get the actual voucher.
Okay, so when a person gets a voucher, they have 90 days to find a unit and then submit it to CMHA. After they find their unit and submit it to CMHA, they submit it to our intake department at intake@cmhanet.com. That process then takes about 2 to 4 days to process their RTA packet, and then we then get it sent over to our inspections department, and that part, it could take up to 14 days to get the inspection completed, and then by HUD regulations, we have 60 days to execute the contract. Our goal is to get that completed for you within 30 days. So in and out the door from the RTA submission, most landlords can expect to be paid within 30 to 60 days after the inspection passes.
Great. And I also wanted to mention, for our in-person attendees, you all received a folder tonight with several pieces of information. For those of you who are viewing virtually, you can get that same packet of information, which probably has some of the same information that Mr. Carter just spoke about, on our website, which is columbushousing2021.com. And if you scroll down a little bit, there is a link where you can click on that link and get that packet. It's a PDF packet. Thank you. For Ms. Parise, when we're talking about the housing division, say if a landlord or property owner has an issue with code violations, would they contact your department or your division to inquire about those, or would they take another route? Do you have any information you can share about that?
Sure, Curtis, happy to do so. I do get a fair amount of phone calls with, there's a code violation on the house next door, my landlord has a code violation, whatever. We have a separate code enforcement group that does that work. We work on, like I said, working with developers and such to do affordable housing. We are not the code officer. So the best way to deal with a code inquiry is to call 311. 311 has a system that refers them to code, and then code will pick up the ball and run with it from there.
Thanks for that. And also, our 311 Customer Service Center is an excellent group of people, so if you have any concerns, feel free to call 311. Thanks for that. Ms. Parise, staying with you, or Aaron, either of you really, there are a lot of people who will buy properties and who will then rent them out, and they want to become landlords. And when they do that, if someone were to buy a property with a tax abatement, will the tax abatement transfer to that person, the new owner?
So, Curtis, that is a really good question. And one of the things I think it's really important for you as landlords to know is that you have to be very, very careful in these transactions, because we have seen numerous instances where somebody says they bought a property they believe is tax abated, and it isn't. So, and then basically they're like, well, what do I do? Well, you have to go back to the old owner and find out what improvements they did to the property and whether it qualifies for a tax abatement. Well, there aren't a whole lot of sellers out there that are willing to open up their books after the sale to show you exactly what they fixed up and how well they did it, and to make sure that they pulled permits in the process. So you cannot be too careful when you are buying something that people are saying is tax abated. If you are in the market and you are buying a property that is or should be tax abated, ask for the documentation. If anybody is giving you a runaround, then it is probably not a good investment for you if you're counting on that tax abatement to make the deal work. If they provide you with some documentation, that's really helpful. The first thing I would look for is if it's already truly tax abated, there should be a letter that is made out to the owner indicating the property has been approved for abatement. In addition to that, you can check on the Franklin County Auditor's website under the Incentives tab, and it will show you if a tax abatement has been approved. Now, that being said, I will also be honest enough to tell you that COVID has not been kind to our tax abatement process, and we are very behind right now. So it could be that they finished it 6 months ago, turned in the application, and it has not been reviewed yet. In that case, I would strongly recommend that you reach out to our office and request us to take a look to see if there's in fact been an application received. Now, does that guarantee that it's going to be approved? Probably not, but we do, as applications are brought into the office, we do a very brief review to make sure that everything we believe should be there is attached. And if something is missing, we will immediately send the owner a letter or an email indicating, received your application, but you're missing a few things. We will also send an email that says, received your application, here's what our timeline is for processing. So once again, if the owner is not giving you a straight answer, it could be, and I have to be honest, we've seen this multiple times where people thought they were getting a tax abated property that isn't tax abated at all. So please, you cannot be too careful. We are happy to take your phone calls, your emails, whatever, to assist you, because we would much rather that you go into this with your eyes wide open than to get a big surprise after the fact.
Thank you. Great information. Kind of staying under the umbrella of purchasing properties, and this is for Mr. Davis or Mr. Carter. If someone purchases a property that is already occupied, and if the property is occupied by a housing choice voucher tenant, how does the new owner begin to get paid?
You're throwing Jeff all the questions. Go ahead.
So this is something that we actually do deal with a lot. So really good question. Landlords change, properties change owners a lot. And essentially, if a new landlord is looking to get paid, the best thing to do is to reach out to CMHA. Because a lot of times we have no idea who the new landlord is, so we can go time periods where we're looking to be contacted and we have this unit that we're not paying on. So we have, you can call our direct line 421-6000. You can email hcvlandlord@cmhanet.com. We just need contact to be made to CMHA and say that you have a property with a tenant that's occupied and you just bought the unit, and we'll get you set up right away so that you can begin to receive payments and any back payments to when that ownership change took place. Because a lot of times, we're notified by the old landlord that they've sold the property, so we hold off on making those payments, but they don't give us the new landlord information. So best bet is to reach out to CMHA. Worst case scenario, just call that direct line. Our call center will get you routed to the right people.
Great. Also, well, let me mention again, if you have any questions, please feel free, the microphone over there, or if you're viewing virtually, feel free to put them in the chat feature. Staying with Mr. Carter, say, for example, if a landlord has a property and they would like to take on a housing choice voucher tenant, do they have the right to screen a housing choice voucher applicant the same as a market rate applicant?
Absolutely. I think that there sometimes could be a misconception that, we expect, voucher holders to receive certain, benefits, screen every individual just as they would anyone else. It's your property. You have the right, to do the same thing that you would do for a market rate tenant, and we solely expect you to do that.
Great. Going to Ms. Parise, and speaking about some of the programs that you mentioned earlier, if an applicant applies for funding for one of those programs, where can they pick up their check for that funding?
There's a big misconception. It never works that way. So first off, when we get an application, our applications aren't just about tell us where the property is and how much you need. We really are spending, with every single application we receive, taxpayer dollars to invest in that housing. And so in order for us to do that, we have to do a thorough review of the application. We have to take a look at the proposed scope of work. We have to determine what the need is. By the time the property gets fixed up, what are your commitments in terms of who's going to live there? So, it is a review process. It is collaborative. You will submit an application. We will review the application. We will ask you for some follow-up information. I promise you, our applications are sufficiently complex that nobody gets it right on the first try. And if you do, numbers will change, and then you'll have to redo it anyhow. But, and the other thing to be very clear about is that there's no opportunity to just pick up a check. The only time we will issue a check to somebody applying for assistance is for down payment assistance, and that check is basically going to the title company to help you close on the purchase of your house. Anything else, we are expecting the funds to be going to either the contractor, if it's Flood Safe Columbus or home repair, it goes to the contractor. For rental properties, we are going to do a very thorough review of any scope of work that you are planning, and we are also going to be taking a look at who your development team is and what your specs and plans look like. Anytime that we get an invoice on that, we are going to be out taking a look at the property to make sure that the work has been done properly, and only after that will we be issuing the check. So it really isn't a, if you've seen the Discover card commercial where the woman says free money, it just doesn't work that way. But by the same token, I would hope that while sometimes it can be very irritating to dot I's and cross T's, I would hope that you would appreciate as taxpayers that our job is to make sure that we are spending your taxpayer dollars appropriately.
Great. I'm going to throw this question to the full panel. We'll start down with Mr. Carter. As Ms. Parise just spoke about, there's a misconception about just getting a check and just getting money. For you all in the programs that you have, what would you say is the biggest misconception that people that you hear a lot? Whether if it's a program that people say, oh, well, it's too much paperwork, or it takes 6 months to even get started, when really it's just a couple of forms and they could maybe get started within 3 months. What are the biggest misconceptions about some of the programs that that you offer and that you're over with your organization? And that's for the full panel.
You're first. I'm going to go second.
I would say, that's a really good question. I would say, I think for myself, one of the big misconceptions with, the Housing Choice Voucher Program or Section 8, I think it's just overall how people view the tenants. I think that Section 8 sometimes can get a bad rep for, tenants are going to destroy my unit, or, and a lot of times, there are situations where bad things do happen, but that you could apply that to a market rate tenant as well. I think a lot of times most of our tenants, though, they're hardworking individuals as well, who really just need a break in housing. And I think for me personally, that's like the biggest misconception, I think, is just the bad rep that a lot of tenants suffer from, for, I guess, one bad apple, kind of rots the whole bag. So I think that is one of the biggest things in my heart that I would speak on.
And I guess to piggyback on that just a little bit, as somebody who has been a hearing officer at the Housing Authority, I saw the numbers. It's less than 1% of everybody we have, and we have more than 14,000 people that we serve, 14,000 households that we serve. So the misconception is there that all Section 8 is bad, and all the clients are bad, and they all destroy your units, and they all got 12 people living in their households, and all these things. And that's not accurate for the large majority of the population that we serve. I will also say that as we continue to grow our program, we are looking at all the things associated with it to determine if these are the right paths for us to go down. So my common misconception that I think that I see the most is that the barriers of entry are so far out there. They're not. There are 6 sub-programs that we have right now that we operate that most of our population in Central Ohio would qualify for if they're under the income threshold. So knowing that the availability is there now puts it on, I need a landlord to house them. So I think we have not enough landlords to do what we need to do on our side.
So, I think that there's a lot of misconceptions around affordable housing. There's quite a few I could pick on. There's a couple I've already given examples to. And I think the one that I'll use in this instance is going back to our work in tax abatement. Some people purchase an existing property and make significant improvements to the property, believing that they will have no real estate tax bill whatsoever. And that is completely inaccurate. So a tax abatement only abates the taxes on the increase in value subsequent to the improvement. So if you buy an existing structure and you put, let's say you spend, I'm going to make up numbers, $10,000, and then you put $5,000 worth of work into it, you have to expect that you're still going to be paying taxes on that $10,000 value that you started with. The only thing that's going to get abated is the $5,000 worth of improvements. So once again, that's something that landlords really need to understand and factor into their decision-making.
I don't have a particular program misconception, but just piggybacking on what I talked about earlier, I certainly think a misconception is that if we stop building apartments, if we stop building housing, that we can stop the growth. And the reality that we're all going to have to figure out over the next few years is the growth is coming and people are choosing Central Ohio. Companies are continuing to add jobs. And so that construction is not driving the growth, but in fact accommodating the growth. So I think that we see a lot of apartments coming up around the city thinking that's really what's driving the growth, and it really is coming, and we're going to have to find a way to accommodate it.
Great information, so thank you all. Going back to our CMHA representatives, if there's a landlord that's watching or one that's here and would like to learn more about CMHA and what you all offer and what you do, are there trainings and classes, workshops that you all offer that landlords could partake in?
Yes, so we do offer a landlord briefing class. We have our CMHA social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, and those events, when they come up, they are posted. We try to have one every month, but I think we're switching to quarterly. But there should be one here in the near future in November that you guys should look out for, and it'll post, like I said, it'll post on our social media sites with the information on there.
I would say they're typically the third Wednesday of the month at, I think it's 2 p.m.
We usually have them at 3 p.m.
3 p.m. So watch our social medias, definitely. We will post it with links so people can log in and participate and ask questions.
And that briefing will give you the entire process of how to go through the process to essentially getting paid and leasing up your unit with a voucher holder.
Again, if anyone has questions, feel free to step to the microphone. And also, those of you that are watching us virtually, feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions, and we will get those answered to you. And we'll go to one of our guests here.
My name is Shirley. I have a question in regards to the tax abatement that you offer to rental owners. How often do you inspect the property for the tax abatement? Say they have one for 12 years or so. How often do you go to inspect that property to make sure it is up to code? And then my next question would be, I'll just ask both while I'm here. How do you get, what are the criteria for developers to come out to a certain area to build housing? Is there something that they're looking for, properties developers are looking for in an area to build, and what are those, if there are any?
Okay, so the first question's a lot easier to answer than the second, so we'll start there. So for as long as you have a tax abatement, we are obligated under the Ohio Revised Code to conduct an annual inspection. Now, that does not mean that we're going to be walking through the property and double checking whether the tenant has put a dent in the drywall. What it means is we're going to drive up to the property and we're going to be looking at the exterior of the property to determine if there are any conditions of concern. So, for example, the roof clearly is deteriorated. There are no gutters or downspouts on the property. There is some kind of chipping, peeling paint on the property. And what happens in those instances is it is documented in our file, and then we have an annual meeting of the Residential Housing Council, which is required under the Ohio Revised Code before we submit our annual reports to the state. And we always recommend to the Housing Council that we notify the property owner of our concern and ask them to remedy it and send us photos showing that it's been remedied. Now, if the developer or owner, property owner, whatever, refuses to do so, then it is within our right to revoke that tax abatement. But that is really not the way that we want to work, and to date, we have not revoked a tax abatement, but we do have an obligation if the property is not being maintained to do that. Now, the second question, you're asking me to get into the head of our developers. I would like to think that I can somewhat predict what they do, but developers are a very unpredictable sort. And so I would ask your indulgence as I give you my best guess. So depending on what the developer is, what their intention is, there are developers who want to buy existing properties one or two at a time and fix them up. There are developers who want to buy large swaths of land and develop large apartment complexes. There are people that want to do some mixture or something in between. And so a lot of it goes back to what does the developer want to accomplish? What is the developer looking for? And when they are looking, if you were basically saying, I want to pick a property anywhere within the city of Columbus and I want to fix up one unit, it may be that your decision is based on how proximate it is to where you live right now. It may be that you have, friends, acquaintances, partners who do business in one particular part of the city, and you're more familiar with that part of the city and wish to do it. And there's just some people that like to go with the roll of the dice and try something new and different. So that is hard to predict. As you get into larger developments, large homeownership subdivisions, rental developments and such, that is when the size of the land and the challenge to get the zoning comes into play. If you want to do a 50-unit homeownership subdivision or a 50-unit apartment complex, you have to find a piece of land that is big enough to accomplish that objective. And then you have to see what the current zoning is and what your chances are of getting it zoned appropriately so that you can go forward with that project. Now, I'm not giving anything away. It's been in the news here for the last couple days that the zoning code needs some work. Luckily, Building and Zoning Services isn't here tonight, so we can beat up on them a little bit without getting defensive. But over 90% of the properties that get developed in our city currently need some kind of zoning variance or rezoning or waiver in order to move forward. And so it is very difficult to find a piece of property that is perfectly zoned on the first try that you don't have to do anything to so you can move forward. And so at least at this point in time, until this zoning code gets some work done on it, that has to be factored into your business decision about whether it's worth you while to move forward.
Great, thank you for that question. Aaron, I have a question for you. Could you kind of talk about, and of course we all know it's a broad spectrum, huge umbrella, but when we talk about the topic of affordable housing, could you kind of speak about, one, kind of just give a general overview of what exactly affordable housing is?
I think one way we look at it, which I talked about a little bit earlier, is the idea of how much you're spending of your own income on your rent or your mortgage payment. And when you exceed that 30% is when you really get into unaffordable territory. And what we have is relatively stagnant wages over the last number of years, but increasing housing costs, so we see that rent burden continue to climb for folks. The other thing I talk about a lot is, in the idea of affordable housing, what I think we're really talking about is the equitable access to housing and the ability for families to choose housing based on their individual needs. And as we see from our peer cities, like places like Austin and Nashville, where you end up with places that that families can't afford to be, right? And they get priced out, and we end up having parts of the city that are just inaccessible to large portions of the families. And so when we talk about affordable housing, we want the family to be able to pay a reasonable amount for housing in that 30% range, but also be able to live in a place where they want to send their kids to school, by where they go to church, by near where the grandparents live, whatever the reason is that you choose a particular house. You know, the other thing we talk a lot about, I think even during my conversation earlier, I talked a lot about units, housing units. And the reality is we all pick a house, but we also pick a community and a neighborhood. And we know that location matters for the trajectory, the safety, how long you live is determined in large part by the zip code in which you're raised. And so how we unwind some of those high opportunity areas and low opportunity areas and make sure that we uplift some communities and make sure there's continues to be access and opportunity for other families to come in, I think is going to be the key to figuring that out. And in Central Ohio, like I said, we've got these peer cities that, you know, sometimes I feel like the ghost of Christmas future, and, you know, kind of really looking at where we've seen it go wrong, and they're spending boatloads of money now trying to unwind what has been done in the last several years during their growth pattern. And we're at a point where we are kind of starting in that trajectory, and we can really set the right path and start to make that equity realized across Central Ohio. And so that's really, for me, it's about equitable access to housing and making sure that we also work with our economic development partners and make sure that we're getting companies into Central Ohio that are offering livable wages and wages that are commensurate with our increasing housing prices. So not a straightforward answer, of course, but really those two pieces are what I think our energy needs to be focused on so we can avoid some of the mistakes that were made by our peer cities.
Great. And I kind of have a follow-up for that before we get to our guest's question. When you say in that 30% range, that 30%, is that 30% for a single person? Is that 30% with a family of four? Is it 30% for just a couple? Or does it have a sliding scale, so to speak?
It's really based on household.
Okay.
And so obviously the bigger your household, you know, that becomes the need for a higher income to support that household and to support the house payment, whether it's rent or mortgage, in order to accommodate a 3 or 4 bedroom house if you have a bigger family, versus an individual that may choose to live in a studio close to their job. But there is, you know, when you look across that, it's really about making sure that there's enough money to do the other things that families need, including saving. And so that's generally where we put the threshold. Now, every family is different, and different needs are going to come for different families, but if we're looking at a general rule of thumb, we use the 30%, but it is just based on household.
Great. All right, thank you. And we'll go to our guest has a question.
Hi, so I am interested to know how does affordable housing come into play for people that don't have income yet? So I work at a refugee resettlement agency known as Us Together, and our refugees that are coming in do not have income. They have state-issued funds that case managers are, you know, responsible for distributing, things like that. So my role is the housing specialist, and finding housing has been extremely difficult, to say the least. And affordable housing is even more difficult. And so in terms of affordable housing initiatives, vouchers, or whatever have you, how does that come into play for refugees and people that are coming in with immigrant statuses?
Probably be for almost any of our panelists.
All right, sorry, I had to think it through for a second. So, knowing what our rules say about mixed income families and things like that, we can house mixed families. However, we still need a qualified person to house them with. It sounds like in this case they're by themselves, so they don't have someone already here to be on a voucher with?
So some of our cases are known as free cases that don't have relatives here, and others have U.S. ties, which would be relatives. Unfortunately, sometimes the case is that the relatives don't want to put their names on their relatives, you know, applications and things like that.
Can you go back up to the microphone?
Sorry, this mic is intimidating. But oftentimes, our families do have relatives here, and sometimes they are more willing to apply, like, as a cosigner or as a guarantor or part of the applications, and other times they're not, and then other times they don't have relatives here. So it's a whole mix.
Status is the problem that I would have in terms of issuing a voucher to any of the refugees. you have to be a citizen. And that's where I get caught up at. But open to conversations to try and figure out how we can partner to make something happen. We've definitely had different conversations on subsidy that isn't directly from HUD. So if that is an option from another organization, we could administer the voucher, no problem. It's just finding the right partner to make it happen.
Understood. Thank you.
So I've got a question to follow up on that. They're refugees, but they're in the country legally. Does that change your answer?
It doesn't, unfortunately. I need to have eligible immigration status in
Okay.
order to house them, which
Okay.
would be the partner person on the actual voucher or the
Okay.
application.
So some of them are listed as refugee status. Others are listed known as SIVs, which is Special Immigrant Visa. And others are parolees, others are asylum seekers. So we have a whole array. I work with newly arrived refugees that have been vetted through the state. And particularly right now, we have an influx of Afghans that are coming in. So
So what I want to do, love to set up a meeting so we can actually talk about how we can do this.
I've been trying to get in contact with
Yeah,
you.
happily give you my card. We will coordinate and get this set up.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Great. Did anyone else have anything to add to that?
I think the biggest challenge is even if they're bringing some kind of funding with them, that funding may be relatively short-term in comparison to a 12-month lease. And that makes it more difficult for landlords to want to sign on because they want to know, once they occupy the unit, that they're going to get that steady income for the duration of the lease. I think that makes it a lot more complicated. So looking for resources or trying to find some way to get some assurance from whoever is providing you the funding that if the need continues, there's some way for that to continue as well.
Great. Anyone else? All right. We'll go back to to Mr. Carter and Mr. Davis. Does CMHA offer ratio utility billing? And if so, could you explain kind of a little bit more about what exactly that is?
So yes, we just implemented a new process where we do actually accept ratio utility billing. This is something in the past where we kind of would send landlords away for, but now, let's say you have a property where the water bill is split up amongst all of the tenants in the building based on household size or just based on overall, bedroom size of the unit. Every household would pay an equal amount. Before we didn't allow that. We wanted, if the tenant was responsible for it, we wanted everything to be individually metered. And that's just not the case anymore. I guess getting up to date with the times, this is something that a lot of properties do. So CMHA is on board with accepting RUBS going forward as we process these contracts that come through.
And also, kind of staying with that, with utilities and other things, does CMHA offer paying for security deposits and vacancy payments on behalf of clients and things of that nature?
I want to step in and take this one because this is something that I'm actually very passionate about. One of the things that I would say I started when I took over as vice president of the HCV department is we instituted landlord incentives. We are paying security deposits for our clients and we are paying a vacancy payment to our landlords. So security deposit assistance works this way. If a client moves into your 0 to 2 bedroom unit, if you have a security deposit associated with that unit, CMHA will pay up to $500 for that unit. If it's less than $500, CMHA will pay up to that number on behalf of the client. If it's 3 bedrooms or larger, we will pay up to $750. Those funds will come to you with your first payment. Now, for accepting this client, CMHA will then process a vacancy payment to you. For your 0 to 2 bedroom, CMHA will pay you a flat $500 fee. For 3 bedrooms and up, we will pay you $750. In addition to that, Mr. Carter mentioned Rosetta Brown. We have a contract with R.H. Brown & Co. They are a relocation service. They are working to find landlords who are willing to accept our voucher. We will happily connect you to Ms. Brown because she has a pipeline of our clients who are looking for housing right now. The number I had was close to 1,000 people actively looking, with a little over 400 getting ready to have a voucher expire. We need landlords. So we're going to do what we can to incentivize landlords to join our program and accept our clients.
All right, thank you for that information. And we'll go to the microphone for a guest question.
Can you explain what a vacancy payment is?
I would say this is not a traditional vacancy payment. If some of you guys are familiar with a HUD-HAP contract, this is more of a, we know you are going to be waiting for us to process things, and we want to thank you for participating in our program. That's our vacancy payment. It is not a traditional, you have experienced 26 days of vacancy, and we're going to process a payment to cover that 26 days. It's not. It's just a flat fee that we're paying to our owners for participating in our program.
My other question is, with the new law or ordinance that they have in the city of Columbus, in which, if I understand correctly, and having gone to other meetings and with Shayla Favor and all that, the way it works now is it is illegal in the city, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure I understand this, one of the reasons I'm here, is when you are accepting rent, when you're accepting the income of people, you cannot discriminate where the income is coming from. So in what I'm thinking in my brain would be that CMHA would be benefiting from that, because Section 8, then people cannot say, well, like he said, it has a, there's this misconception about people, and that is so racist. I mean, I'm gonna put out there. Okay, but there is a misconception, and as a landlord that you hear, if people are Section 8, it's like they automatically think you're a slumlord or whatever. So there's this misconception about that. But with this new law, I'm just wondering, I know that you always have like a large amount of people that are waiting, because you have plenty of applicants, from what I understand. So has this changed this for you, or are they actually like putting it into play, or or does that not include Section 8, or is that separate? You know what I mean? Because I understood that the income, as a landlord, we have to accept anything that is considered income, and you cannot say, okay, well, it has to be, you have to be, working at Chase for 50 years, and it has to be a payroll check. It cannot be child support. It cannot be, whatever other disability or whatever. So that's my question.
So I can, did you have anything you wanted to add on that? One of the things that I would say for sure, to clarify my understanding of source of income, if you are receiving $800 a month in subsidy from CMHA, that is now part of your income. If you had another $200 that you were receiving for child support, you now have $1,000 a month of income, which is now translating out to $12,000 a year. Now, as a property owner, if you have your screening set and you determine that that $12,000 is enough to sufficiently cover rent, by all means, accept it. But if you determine that you're looking for 2.5 times and that doesn't cover 2.5 times the rent, that's a different conversation. So I don't see source of income as saying, well, you have to accept Section 8. I see it saying, give everybody a fair shot at renting your place by calculating their income.
To me, income is income, so, but some other people don't see it that way. So I'm just wondering if with this, if you all are like running into any roadblocks, or is it just too soon, or many people don't know about it? Or?
So we had a conversation earlier today, and in that conversation, we were talking about how some of the landlords who are being confronted with this are figuring out ways how they can avoid having to accept a voucher. And it's little things. So we are seeing it, but it's how do we combat it on our side to make sure that we aren't letting a client go unserved when they should be served.
And there is a process that's going to begin probably in the next week or couple weeks with Councilmember Favor's office and a consultant team that's coming out to do some education and some conversations with community members about the source of income and the Housing for All legislation. So you will see stuff on that coming out. It's a group called Renter Mentor, and they'll be leading some conversations. For city council.
Great information. Thank you all for that. As we begin to wrap up for the evening, we want to, kind of circle back, letting you all know that this series started as a way to help build relationships and build bridges between city departments and agencies with the landlords in our neighborhoods. As we believe that strong neighborhoods make a strong city, we want to be able to partner with you all to make sure that that we're providing you with great resources, great information, and great things that you can then in turn pass on to your tenants. So as we begin to wrap up, this is a question again for the entire panel, which again, thank you all for joining us this evening. If you could leave the landlords here with us in the room and those watching with us virtually a piece of information, whether that be, make sure that you contact us as we have programs that can help you. If it's, we need you a part of our organization so that we can help to keep things moving in our neighborhoods. What would be one piece of information that you could share with the landlords that they could take away from this evening? And Aaron, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
I can start. I think I'm probably skipping ahead to the fourth one in your series because I think Kim will talk about this as well. But just to make sure you guys know, the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio has created a website, and it's Rentful, RENTFUL 614.com. And that is going to be a clearinghouse for the emergency rental assistance. So there is a section for landlords and there's a section for tenants as well. And again, it's Rentful 614. So if you're interested in that emergency rental assistance, because it is going out through a number of partners across the city. And so figuring out which partners have which funding and applies to who can be a little bit confusing. So Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio created that kind of clearinghouse website. So if there's information you need on the emergency rental assistance, you can find it there.
Thanks.
Did you want to take the question or keep going?
We'll finish this out and then
Okay.
yeah.
So I talked a little bit about Lead Safe Columbus, but it didn't come up again, so I'm going to put a plug in for that. Properties built before 1978, which is when lead-based paint was outlawed, have lead paint or the risk of lead paint being in them, and the opportunity for multifamily landlords to be able to submit those properties for consideration for Lead Safe Columbus is something that you ought to think about doing. And while I have to confess my own ignorance when I first got into this, and I'm like, okay, so it has lead paint, you're going to repaint my bedroom walls, what? What it is the biggest risks for lead-based paint are windows, because your windows go up and down and they create friction, and if there's lead paint on those, they can create lead dust that poisons children. And if the children play outside and your wood siding is coated with lead paint, that lead paint is going to come off and get into the ground and get into these children. So you may think of it as a paint program, but in fact, the largest bulk of the expense that we have with Lead Safe Columbus is replacing windows and siding. And so if you are going into a property and you're looking at it saying these windows are not going to last or this siding is shot, it may be an opportunity, as long as you are committing to make the housing available for low-income individuals, and particularly for children under the age of 6, it may be an opportunity to get that rehab. So keep that in mind.
For me, emergency housing vouchers. CMHA was awarded 304 emergency housing vouchers. We have partnered with Community Shelter Board to issue these emergency housing vouchers. These vouchers target specifically disabled homeless people. We are pushing to get as many of these emergency housing vouchers that we have issued leased up as quickly as possible. There are many, many, many perks to this program versus our HCV program. That's why it is such a special program for us. The additional dollars that are associated with it, they can go to the landlord to cover fees for the clients to get them in. If a particular homeless client has arrears for utilities, there's dollars available for that. If there is a need for them to stay in a hotel until the unit's ready, there's dollars for that. This is a program that will get people off the street. We just need the landlords to accept it. The potential benefit is that as a landlord, you can ask for up to 120% of the fair market rent. There is a high possibility that as long as the unit is qualified and we do our rent reasonableness on it and it comes in appropriately, you will get paid more than you would for a traditional housing choice voucher. So we need landlords who are willing to accept the emergency housing voucher. Happy to have a discussion with anyone about the emergency housing voucher program and how they can join and participate after this.
And I'm going to kind of piggyback off of the last two individuals, Rita and Justin. First thing, I actually just took a Hqs training, and we had a big part on lead-based paint. And I didn't know how severe that was and the implications of, I guess, the downside of the lead-based paint and how it affects children under the age of 6. It was really eye-opening. So that would lead me to say, one of the informational pieces that I did hand off was a Hqs Inspection Checklist. I think that's something, if you're really interested in getting on to the Section 8 program, would be familiarizing yourself with the Hqs Inspection Checklist. I mean, that would definitely set you up for success to be prepared. When that part of the process comes, it expedites the contracting portion so that you can get paid sooner, and the individual can move into the unit a lot sooner too if you're prepared to pass an inspection. I would say please utilize our website. There's a lot of information on there, www.cmhanet.com. I'll give you an email address, hcvlandlord@cmhanet.com. Please reach out to us if you have questions. We need landlords now more than ever. With the housing, housing shortage that we're facing now, especially when it comes to affordable housing. We have a lot of tenants that need to find housing, and we can't do it without you individuals. So please, if you have questions, reach out to us, visit our website, and we're here to answer those questions for you.
Great, thank you for that. And also, I wanted to mention that the topics that they mentioned as far as the checklist, lead-based paint, and also the Rentful 614, that document that I mentioned earlier that's on our website, there's information about all of that in that PDF document as well as in your packets tonight. And we will go to our last guest question for the evening over at the microphone.
This is for the gentleman from CMHA. When you were talking about these different things that are available, the security deposit assistance, is that Section 8 or is that some other program?
So, in April of 2021, we allocated $1.45 million to pay landlord incentives out. We originally had slated that to end August 31st, but we didn't even get close to spending $1.5 million. So far, we've just now crossed over $1 million that we've pushed out to the community. So we still have a little over $400,000 that we are hoping to give out to landlords in 2021. We just need you guys to come with a client. Yeah.
Questions. You were mentioning about this emergency assistance.
Emergency housing vouchers.
The well, I'm not sure, that you were talking about for
Okay.
disabled homeless
Yes, emergency
people?
housing vouchers, yes.
Okay, so those are vouchers then that,
Our vouchers. So the thing with the emergency housing vouchers, it is a almost traditional voucher. So when I say almost traditional, a traditional voucher, as a voucher holder, you have it till you no longer want it. If you decide you want to exit the program, you can resign tomorrow. If you have increased your income to the point where you no longer need subsidy, you no longer have a voucher associated with you 6 months after that point. With the emergency housing vouchers, they last until the client no longer needs it. So that could be a year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, for all we know. It will stay with that family.
okay. And one last question, just out of curiosity. How long are prospective tenants usually on the wait list for Section 8 these days? I just had a tenant who finally got approved. She said she'd been on the list for 17 years.
So In January, February, March, and April of 2021, we selected lottery holders to be determined eligibility. So far, we have determined eligibility for 1,200 clients and issued vouchers for, I believe it's 643 so far, with another 600 pending to be issued vouchers in this community prior to the year's end. So we have a huge swath of vouchers out there, and unfortunately, because of how our community is in terms of real estate and affordability in terms of rental units, there's a large swath of that population that unfortunately won't be able to find housing, which will prompt them to go back on to our lottery. And when we redraw again, which we draw based on availability of funds and availability of vouchers to be allocated to our community. Right now, we have the vouchers available and the funds available. We just don't have the units. So that's, again, why we are here trying to get the units from you guys to join and participate into the program. So we can house more people, we can serve more people here.
Thank you. Great information. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Just a last bit of information. Of course, this is our first night of our series for 2021. We have 3 evenings left. The next one is this Thursday, October 21st, starting at 6 o'clock. If you plan on attending in person, we will be at Blackburn Community Center on the Near East Side. That is our virtual city hall. We will have representatives from our city attorney's office, code enforcement, Columbus Police, as well as our Division of Refuse. You can ask any questions you have. Also, next Tuesday, October 26th, we will be at Glenwood Community Center. That evening is themed Safe and Secure, where we will be discussing safety programs that are going on in our neighborhoods and how landlords can partner with us around our safety programs. And our last evening will be Keeping Families at Home, which is Thursday, November 4th, again starting at 6 o'clock, and that will be at the Linden Community Center, where we will have information on additional rental assistance programs, as well as programs around eviction prevention. We hope that you will join us. It's not too late to register. Again, that website, columbushousing2021.com. There are in-person spots available, as well as spots to view virtually. We hope that you will join us. Again, a great panel this evening. Aaron Prosser, Assistant Director of Housing Strategies for the City of Columbus. Rita Parise, Housing Administrator with the City of Columbus. Mr. Justin Davis, Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program with Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. That's a mouthful. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Jeff Carter, Assistant Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program from Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Let's give them a round of applause. Again, if you would like more information, please feel free to visit that website. And if you have questions specifically for myself, please send those to cnss@columbus.gov. Thank you for joining us virtually and for joining us in person, and we hope to see you Thursday. Everyone, have a great evening.